sure I got a clean edit because I am recording these and posting these online, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So let's recenter. It's been a very busy day. I got a great show for you. Let me restart here. So welcome to the 8th episode of What Did We Learn This Week? This is the show where I share technology tips, tricks, and short lessons that I have provided to my customers over the last week with you. I am Jonathan, and I work for Minnesota State Services for the Blind as a technology trainer. My clients range from low vision to totally blind, and I help them stay independent through the use of technology like computers, tablets, and smartphones. We are recording our first episode of the year. This is February 19th, 2021. You'll notice that we took quite a bit of a break. Things got a little bit crazy busy after the holidays here, but we are back up and going. There's a couple of differences you're going to see if you have attended some of our previous sessions. I mentioned for people who just joined, I've got a big set of headphones on. And I've got a microphone that's quite obviously sitting in front of me. I look a little bit like a radio DJ. This is a setup I have used previously for recording sessions, podcasts, audio recordings, and doing some other remote training. I'm using this today versus my old setup because about 10 minutes before we began, I realized things were not working correctly. So I'm going back to this sort of my old faithful, but I do look a little bit more intense with these headphones and this microphone on, and I might sound a little bit different. And so also forgive me, I haven't gotten a ton of practice. I'm going to try to make sure I stay near this microphone here, but I do have a tendency to move around a little bit. And so if I get a little bit faint, I'm going to do my best I can to sit right in front of this. So other things that kind of went off a little bit, you'll notice we usually have some introduction music, and if you're using the visuals, we usually have some graphics, but things were not working out, and I wanted to make sure I got you the best version of this I can, so we're doing a little bit more low tech. Also, we're using a different tool than last time for the broadcast. This is actually Zoom Webinar that we are using, and the difference between this one here is that instead of a normal Zoom meeting where we can all necessarily see each other, this time it's just going to have the visual. It's just going to be me. And then when we get to the question and answer, there's going to be a way for you to raise your hand, and I can kind of selectively bring people in, depending on how much time we have for the Q&A. And that's the only thing that's really going to be different for most of you. You're just going to notice that your video and audio isn't turned on by default, and I don't have to manually go in and mute everybody. And I'm looking over to the right, and that's got a list of all my guests, and I can see if people are raising their hands, etc. We'll talk about how to do that when we get to that section. So a couple more notes before we get in. The topic today is going to be using a keyboard with VoiceOver on an iPad or an iPhone. And I'm going to be doing quite a bit of the demo here on an iPad. And I'm going to be talking about keyboards and how they might connect and why you might want to do that and how they work. Everything works on the iPhone as well. So if you have an iPhone, you can do pretty much everything. There's only one difference, and I'll point that out. And if you're not on Apple's hardware, you can actually do most of these things with an Android phone or Android tablet as well. They also have full keyboard support. Although some of the keyboard commands I'm going to teach you when we get into VoiceOver, controlling VoiceOver with the keyboard, those are going to be a bit different. But as far as being able to type and how you're going to connect your keyboard, that's going to be very, very similar. I don't have my graphics today, but I will mention if you do have questions you'd like to have us cover in future episodes, our question line number is 0122. Let me repeat that. That's 320-428-0122. That calls into an answering service. Leave your question, and if we think it makes sense to work into the show, we will do so. If you are a first-time person joining us, you can also sign up to get emails about upcoming episodes at blind.support/sign up. That's all lowercase, and that's not .com. That's blind.support. We got this kind of cool domain that's just blind.support. We're also going to be starting to post some of our old episodes online. We have been doing so onto YouTube, but sometimes that's not the easiest thing to navigate to or to get to. So I've also set up on that webpage, blind.support, a list of the episodes. It's not the most sophisticated system right now. It's a list of episodes with links to take you to the YouTube videos, but I just find it a lot easier to navigate. And if you're using a screen reader, each of the episode titles is a heading, and then you just go to the next element, down arrow if you're on JAWS, VO right arrow if you're on VoiceOver, and you'll see a link. And when you double tap, it will go and start playing that episode. So you'll find that by visiting blind.support, and there's a link at the top of the page marked episodes, or you can go directly there by visiting blind.support/episodes. We will be making that a little bit more sophisticated in the future, but there were some issues with reading with the screen reader, so I'm keeping it real simple for right now. All right, so big introduction. Let's get into it. Physical keyboards with a phone or a tablet. So one of the big advantages of having a mobile device like an iPad, a Android tablet, or an iPhone is that they're small and they're portable, and we can carry them around the house. We can carry them out into the wild, and they don't take a lot of space. They're really light. They're really easy to bring along with us. But typing has always been a challenge on these devices. If we're using our vision, the keyboards on these tend to be right on the touchscreen, and that makes them smaller, that makes them non-tactile. It can make them a lot harder to use, especially if we're typing something longer. We're writing up a long email address. We're starting our memoirs. We don't have to live with just these on-screen keyboards. We can actually use physical keyboards along with those, and that does include the phone. I've got a friend who uses her phone for everything. She's totally blind, and she doesn't need a bigger display, and she finds that the phone has all the features that she wants. She can browse the internet, she can send emails, and she can write. So she actually does use a physical keyboard when she's writing up something longer on it. So the advantages of the keyboards, of course, are they're physical, and I have a lot of choices. I can pick out a big keyboard or a little keyboard, and I can use that with my device rather than having to fiddle around with that on-screen keyboard. If we are learning a key typing for the first time, having physical keys is an easier process for learning the keyboard layout. And of course, we're less likely to make mistakes if we can feel our keyboard. If we don't have it all memorized, we can find those keys and remember that the Y is next to the T, and I remember the T's over here, and I can feel those keys and I can explore. And I'm not going to make as many mistakes as I might with the on-screen keyboard, where everything's really small and non-tactile. We can still use features like dictation on our iPad and our phone, even if we're using a hardware keyboard. So we're not losing that capability. But dictation can make mistakes, especially if you're writing something highly technical or using a lot of names, for example. That's the type of thing dictation can get wrong. So there's a lot of pros to it. There are some cons. Obviously, if I'm carrying around a keyboard with me and I'm trying to walk around with my phone, that's not making it very portable anymore. I'm not going to be able to fit all that into my pocket, but we don't have to carry the keyboard around with us all the time. So there's not a lot of cons to it other than the cost up front and the idea that we're probably not going to carry on with us all the time. So we still want to know how to do things like typing without a hardware keyboard, so we're not dependent upon it if we can. So talk about why a keyboard. Of course, there's another big reason we might do a keyboard, and that is a lot of the voiceover commands we do with gestures. We can oftentimes make mistakes when trying to do a flick left or flick right or double tap, and might misinterpret our gesture. And we might be more comfortable navigating with a keyboard instead, where we're hitting physical keys. So we can also control our screen readers, our voiceovers, and our talkback with our physical keyboard. And we might find that experience more consistent or reliable as well. And I actually really love keyboard navigation with the screen reader. So that's what we're really going to dig into. So we talked about why a keyboard, but let's talk about what types of keyboards would even work with an iPhone or an iPad. Well, there's three different types of keyboards that we might use with our devices. The most common one, and the one we're going to demo today, is a Bluetooth keyboard. So Bluetooth is a type of wireless technology. It's like Wi-Fi, except for it's for your devices. It allows one device, a keyboard in this example, to communicate with your iPad or iPhone. It has a much shorter range than Wi-Fi does. Most of them are good for about 30 feet, so that's going to be plenty for using a keyboard, for example. Some of them do go up to 150 feet, depending on the situation, but it's meant to be a short-range wireless connection. It does mean the keyboard you're using will have to use batteries, whether they're rechargeable or a set of AA's or AAA's that you put inside of them. They come in lots of different sizes. The one I'm going to be using today is this one right here. And this is a Logitech K30. K380. So that's K380. It's about a $30 keyboard. I picked this one up at Target, but you can find them at Best Buy or a lot of electronic retailers. Logitech is a pretty common accessory maker. And they make this one that's a pretty small one. It's about the size of, I'd say, a laptop keyboard. It's a little bit more compressed. The keys are round rather than square. It's not perfect, but it suits me very well. You're not restricted to just these Bluetooth keyboards, and those do come in all different sizes here. Now, just because you go to a shop and you see a wireless keyboard, that doesn't mean it's necessarily Bluetooth. Some wireless keyboards use a receiver, a little USB dongle that plugs into the computer, and that's how they talk to each other. That will not work with your iPhone and iPad. Wireless has to be Bluetooth. Now, you're not restricted, and I should say I've got two Bluetooth keyboards right here. One's from Logitech, one's from Apple, for example. There's quite a price difference between them. The Logitech one's about $30. It uses two AAA batteries, and then this Apple one, this came with a computer that I had. It has its own built-in rechargeable battery, but if you bought one of these, it's between 60 and 70. It's made of aluminum, and it's kind of a cool keyboard, but it doesn't do more than this Logitech one does. So they're both good. There are some advantages and disadvantages to both of them. In addition to these wireless keyboards, if you do have a wired keyboard that you love and you're like, I wish I could use this with my iPhone and iPad, I don't want to have to learn a new smaller keyboard. I've got a nice big one here. So let me give you an example. Here's a big full size. It's another aluminum keyboard here. And I'd say, hey, I want to use one of these big ones. It's got the full number pad. It's got the home and page up and page down, a lot more spacious. Or maybe it's an ergonomic keyboard that you're in love with and you're like, I need to use this one. It's really much better for my hands. There actually is a way to use a wired keyboard with your phone or iPad. You've got to do something a little bit funny, but it is fully supported. And that is, you need an accessory like this. So this is a little adapter. It has a lightning port on one side. That's the type of cable that plugs into the bottom of your iPhone or iPad. And it has a USB port on the other end, which is where I can plug the USB of a keyboard in there. And it has to be a USB keyboard. It can't be one of those really old PS2 ones, which are a circular. It has to be a USB, but I can plug this in and I can use that keyboard with my iPhone or iPad. Now, the funny thing is, this is not advertised as a USB adapter for your iPhone and iPad. This is actually marketed, this is from Apple, and it's a Lightning to USB camera adapter. It's about $30. And you probably find other versions of this as well, but as the camera adapter, it's meant so someone can take their digital camera and plug that in and transfer photos from a really nice high-end camera into their iPad or iPhone, but it also works with keyboards. There's one more type of keyboard. So you can get a wired one. You got to buy a $30 adapter. Keeping in mind this Logitech keyboard, the whole keyboard cost me $30. There's one other type, and that is if you have the latest version of the iPad Air or any of the iPad Pros, they make a variety of keyboards designed specifically for those types of iPads. And what they do is they actually attach them. I'm going to show you one. So what I have is this is a first generation iPad Pro, and it has a special case here, and it has a set of magnets that actually attaches. There's actually a connector on the side of the iPad. It connects, and then this folds out into a keyboard. And this actually pulls power from the iPad. It does not use batteries. It physically connects to the iPad. You'll only find this for the iPads. You won't find anything like this for the iPhone. Those are all going to be Bluetooth. But the iPad, the newest iPad Air and the iPad Pros all have this special port at the bottom, specifically for attaching accessories like a keyboard. So I mentioned that we today are going to be using a Logitech Bluetooth keyboard for this entire demonstration here, but you can use any of those types of keyboards that you want. There's one other little note, and we're not going to go into this in great detail, but when you buy a keyboard like the K380 or any of these other Bluetooth keyboards, some of them are designed to work with the iPhone and the iPad, and some of them were designed to work for Apple computers, and some of them are designed to work with Windows computers. Now, you can use any of those keyboards with an iPhone or an iPad. It doesn't care. The thing that changes ever so slightly between them is the set of command keys. Those are the keys to the left or right hand side of the space bar. On Apple, we have the Command, Option, and Control keys going from right to left. So I'm on the space bar, I'm going to the left, Command, next key Option, next key Control. That's a standard Apple keyboard layout. On Windows, when we don't have a command key, so their layout is Alt, which is sometimes also known as Option, the Windows key or the Start key, and then the Control key. Well, that layout's a bit different. And when we get into keyboard commands, we're going to need to know that those are a little bit different. There is a way of going into the settings, in the keyboard settings on your iPhone or iPad, and adjusting what your key layout, how your keyboard layout works. We're not going to go into that in great detail today because we simply just don't have enough time to go over everything. But you're just going to keep in mind that your Control, Option, and Command key might be in a slightly different place. And if you're not sure of that location, don't worry. When we get into the voiceover portion, we're going to turn on something called Keyboard Help, and it's going to help us identify each of those keys. So if you're not sure, we're going to give you the answer to how to do that. But also know if you go into Settings, and then in General, there's a section for Keyboard, and that's where you can go to make some of these changes about what those command keys do. So you can use any keyboard you want, as long as it's Bluetooth or it's USB and you have that adapter. That's the most important takeaway. So you decide, hey, I'm going to try out one of these cool Bluetooth keyboards. How do I connect them to the iPad? So this is an important thing to know how to do, especially if you bought one on our own. So we're going to do a demonstration here, and I'm going to be using my iPad, and I'm going to be using my K380 Logitech keyboard, and we're going to connect the two here. Now, this is where things are going to get a little interesting because I'm not using my normal setup where I could easily switch to a side-by-side view and get the audio from the keyboard from the iPad. I'm going to be trying to do a screen share with me. So just be a little bit more patient with me. It's going to be a little bit less smooth than it's been in the past. But I think looking at the list here, I think we all know each other here. So I think I could trust you to be patient with me. So I'm going to attempt to use the screen sharing feature here. And grab the video from the iPad here. So give me one moment here. It's the first time I'm using this tool as well. I'm going to hit my screen sharing. I believe I can grab this iPad here. Oh, it's showing my iPhone here, which is another thing I was going to show you here in a moment. Hold on here. I'm going to start a new share and try this a little bit differently. Of course, it figures I've got two devices. I've got an iPhone and an iPad plugged in here at the same time. So it looks like it's really going to give me a hard time with this. Don't worry. I figured this might be the case. We're going to improvise here just a little bit. So I'm going to unplug this iPad here, and I'm going to stop my my screen share here, and we're going to go to my video. And switch that to our Cameo, and then we'll stop our screen sharing here. Okay, so what you should be seeing if you do have the visuals here is I've got another camera set up so we can see the iPad screen so you can follow along with me here. I'm going to go ahead and crank up my volume here so you can hear this voiceover here and turn on our voiceover.
Voiceover on, 2:24 p.m. Landscape.
So I apologize if the audio is going to be a little bit funny here, but bear with me. So I want to quickly connect my Bluetooth keyboard here with my iPad. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a section in settings for Bluetooth. And the way I could get to that is I could, hold on here. The way I can get to that is either by going into settings, and in the main section of settings, there's an area called Bluetooth, or I can ask Siri to open the Bluetooth settings for me. I'm going to go ahead and actually do it the manual way here. I'm going to jump down to my settings. I'm going to double tap.
Settings, personal hotspot, off, cellular, Bluetooth, white, Bluetooth, on, button.
So I'm going to navigate to settings and find my way to Bluetooth.
Bluetooth, heading.
So now that I'm in the Bluetooth settings, now I need to switch back over to my keyboard. And what I want to do is I need to put my keyboard in discovery mode. And you might have to check with the manufacturer for this. On the Logitech ones, what I do is I hold down the F1, F2, or F3 key on this K380. It might have its own sync button. What I do is I hold that button down and a light's going to start to blink on my device. And now if I go back to my iPad and I flick to the right here, I'm going to find something called Other Devices, and it should find that keyboard.
Bluetooth. Now discoverable as Jonathan. My devices. Jonathan's AirPod. Other devices. In progress. Keyboard K380. Button.
There's my keyboard K380. I'm going to double tap on that.
Keyboard K380. Connecting. Bluetooth. On.
So it went ahead and connected to it. If I'm not sure, I can flick to the right and I'll hear that K3. Oh, I accidentally turned my Bluetooth off. I was getting a little bit too excited there. I've now paired the two. So the keyboard's going to have a pairing button. On the Logitech ones, it's usually the F1 key, regardless of which one that you have. And you're going to hold that down. It might have a physical button on the back. Sometimes near where the power switch is, we hold that down for about 5 seconds, puts it in discoverable mode. Now I can go into Bluetooth, flick to the right.
Keyboard K380. Connected.
And now if I go back to that keyboard K380 is now listed there and it's connected. So if I turn the power off on my keyboard, it will automatically disconnect from the iPad. And when I turn it back on again, it will reconnect. I don't have to redo this every time, just one time. So what I've done is what I've done now is I'm going to flip our camera back over here. I've got my keyboard and my iPad now synchronized, and it will stay that way even if I change the batteries in my keyboard. If you ever if you ever get stuck, remember you can always follow these steps a second time if your keyboard's not reconnecting. But for the most part, it should keep that connection. You shouldn't have to repair them. So once they've been paired, I can now immediately start using my keyboard with my iPad. Now, if I didn't use VoiceOver, if I'm just a low vision user, I've got my magnification, everything else on, this would basically just replace anywhere on the device I would normally be typing. So if I opened up mail and I started a new mail message, I could begin typing on the keyboard. And it's just going to type wherever. And that still applies exactly the same way for VoiceOver, where I can actually just anywhere I would normally type, I can type with my keyboard instead. When I have my keyboard connected, the default behavior is that when I can type something, it's not going to bring up the on-screen keyboard anymore. It's going to actually just assume you want to talk with the Bluetooth keyboard. So they're connected. Everything's working automatically. Great. So obviously typing seems simple enough, but what about VoiceOver? How does VoiceOver work with a keyboard? So I'm going to flip us back over again here so you can see a view of my keyboard. Let me make a little bit more space here. There we go. So you can see my keyboard and you can see my iPad here. In all of the gestures that you might know how to do with VoiceOver, our flicks to the right, our flicks to the left, our double taps, for example, left, even our two-finger tap to pause it, those all have keyboard equivalents. Now, VoiceOver uses a system where they have a set of keyboard commands all set to what's called the Voiceover keys. If you're used to JAWS, you might think of this as the JAWS key. Now, on JAWS, we use the insert key. On the Apple platforms, whether we're on their desktop or their iPads or iPhones, we use Control and Alt. Now, on the Logitech keyboard, the Control key is the bottom leftmost key. Then there's a Function key, and then I have the Option key. So I've got to keep my fingers a little bit separate for this part. When I hold down these keys, any other key I press on the keyboard is a VoiceOver command. So if I hold Control, Alt, and press the right arrow, it's going to go to the next item.
Other devices. Keyboard K380. Connected. Button. Other devices. Heading.
So I can essentially move left and right, do the flick left and flick right by holding down Control, Alt, and pressing the right or left arrow keys. I can also make a selection, which would be a double tap by hitting Control, Alt, and the space bar. Now, that seems like a lot of keyboard commands for a particular gesture we're going to be doing over and over and over again. Flicking left, flicking right, and double tapping is the bread and butter, the most basic, but also the most frequently used keyboard commands. So there is something else built into VoiceOver. They know this is the case that will allow us to just use the arrow keys by themselves to navigate the iPad. And this is a feature they refer to as Quick Nav. We turn on Quick Nav by pressing the left and right arrow keys at the same time. And when we do that, it's going to make a tone. I told you this was a weird setup here. I just knocked my my camera right over here. So where was I? Yes, I was going to say I can turn on Quick Nav with the left and right arrow keys at the same time. When I do that, it makes a tone, an up tone or a down tone. When I press the left and right and I hear an up tone, a bloop, that means quick nav's now on, and I can press the left.
Keyboard K380. Other devices.
I can press the left and right arrow keys to move through without having to hold down Control and Alt. If I want to double tap, I press the up and down at the same time in order to make a selection. So now I can do my main navigation, my go to the previous and go to the next and make a selection, all using just the arrow keys. A lot simpler for navigating. But the Control and Option key are still very important to know. And we're going to be using a lot of keyboard commands. So we got our new keyboard, we got it connected, but we're not really that comfortable with the layout yet. And we're not really that familiar with all the keyboard commands. So what can we do? Well, there is a built-in feature on the iPad. I'm going to hit the home button here just to take me back to the main menu for this next part.
FaceTime.
There is a feature built in called Keyboard Help. And Keyboard Help is designed to allow us to explore the keyboard, hear what the different keys are doing without accidentally typing or writing something up. We can get the Keyboard Help one of two ways. One way is to hold down the Control and the Alt key and press the letter K on our keyboard. But if we're brand new to it, we might not know these command keys, and we might not be that familiar with how to get to the home row to find that K, which is usually under our right middle finger. So I can do a voiceover gesture. That's a 4-finger double tap anywhere on the screen.
Starting help. To stop help, perform a 4-finger double tap or 2-finger scrub, or press escape on the keyboard.
All right, so that is Keyboard Help is now turned on. Now, when I press each of the keys, it's simply going to say what that key is that I pressed out loud.
Control, Option, Command, Shift, Z, A, F, T, delete.
Now I can explore the keyboard and find all of the keys. I'm going to make one note here is that some keyboards, in fact, a lot of keyboards, have an FN key or a function key. And the function key can be unique to your keyboard. And when I press that key, it's not saying anything. That key, when I press it and I press one of the F keys, F1 through F12, it'll perform a different action. It changes the function. Each keyboard is a little different. It may have this, it may not. And what those function keys do may change. So I can't give you a definitive I can't give you a definitive example of exactly what that FN key is going to do, but know that sometimes that doesn't talk with Keyboard Help. So I could press the keys to hear what each of those keys does. Or if I do a combination, the Control Option, I hold those down and I press a key, it's going to tell me what does that keyboard command do in VoiceOver. So I'm going to do this with the letter A. I'm going to press Control Option A.
Option. Cap A. Read all.
It says read all. That's a command that will read everything on the screen from wherever you're starting. So that's our read continuously. Or that would be the 2-finger flick down on the iPad or phone screen. So now I can play with the keys. I can try Control Alt and hit different key combinations and kind of explore and find some of those keyboard commands. And when we're done with this, I just press the escape key to end Keyboard Help.
Escape. Escape. Stopping help.
And now everything's back to normal. I can use my keyboard to navigate. I believe my quick nav is still on, so I'm just going to press the right arrow key.
Outlook. Clock. Home. Photos. Camera. Reminders. Notes.
And I can navigate using the keyboard. A lot more reliable pressing one key than it is trying to do a perfect flick to the right or a perfect flick to the left. So there are a ton of keyboard commands that VoiceOver can respond to. And you might be thinking, how do I even find out what those are? I could turn on Keyboard Help and try every single keyboard combination. That seems good work, but seems a bit efficient. There's also some keyboard commands you might miss. There's some special ones that are Control, Option, and Command together. That's all 3 of those important command keys at the bottom. All 3 of those in the letter H, for example, takes you to the next heading on a web page, for example. So how do I find all these? Well, I'm going to give you two ways to do that. One is I can go to Voiceover Settings. And when I in the Voiceover Settings, there's a section called Commands. Here, let me show you how I'm going to get there. I'm going to first I'm going to activate Siri and ask her to open up Voiceover Settings for me. Open Voiceover Settings.
Let's take a look at the settings for VoiceOver. Settings, VoiceOver, heading.
And now in VoiceOver, I'm going to flick to the right, or since I've got my keyboard with a quick nav on, I'm just going to press the right arrow key until I hear Commands.
VoiceOver. VoiceOver speaks up. Tap once to double tap to learn more. VoiceOver practice. Speaking rate. Speaking rate. Speech. Braille. Verbosity. Audio. Commands. Button.
So there's a button for commands. I'm going to press the up and down arrow keys together to open up that commands list.
VoiceOver. Back button.
And now when I flick to the right or press the right arrow, I'm going to find a section for keyboard shortcuts.
Commands. All commands. Touch gestures. Keyboard shortcuts. Button.
And when I get to keyboard shortcuts, I'm just going to press the up and down arrow keys to select it.
Keyboard commands. Back button.
And now I can flick to the right or press the right arrow key, and it will start to list me through all of the keyboard commands, what they are and what they do.
Keyboard edit, search, dictate, but keyboard, magic tab, hyphen, watch item, shift hyphen, label item, slash, toggle lock modifier keys, move to previous visible app, left square bracket, notification, Teams.
All right. And so as I go to the right, it's going to list off each of those keyboard commands and what they are. Now, you notice these ones don't mention the control option. They are assuming that. These all start with control option. So when it says just A, it means control option A, for example. So this can read me through all of the keyboard shortcuts. If you prefer not to navigate this, you can also visit blind.support. And there's a section there called iOS support. And then you'll find a full list of all of the VoiceOver gestures and keyboards that I've written out for you as well. So we're going to learn just a handful of really helpful keyboard commands that we can use with VoiceOver, but know that there are a lot more out there. So one of the ones that's especially useful is if we want to keep our hands on this keyboard. When I'm using the keyboard, I like to keep my hands on it. I don't like to have to reach up and do gestures if I don't absolutely have to. And there are some cases where you do. There are some things that only have gestures. But if I want to go back to the home menu, I can do my control option H. And that's the same as hitting the home button. It takes me back to the home menu. In fact, if I do it twice in a row,
app switcher, settings, active.
It'll open up the app switcher.
Available.
I'm going to hit control option H again. It's exactly the same as hitting the home button. So if I do it once, it's like I hit the home button once, going back to the home menu. If I do it twice, it opens up the app switcher. And 3 times is the accessibility shortcut if you've got that set up. I just press it very quickly.
Teams. Now.
We can also press the control key.
Home. Teams.
Hold on here. I'm getting a couple of notifications here.
2:41 p.m. Heading not found.
So if I press the control alt H key, that's going to open up my home menu. Twice is going to bring up the app switcher. 3 times this keyboard shortcut, exactly the same as hitting that physical home button. And it's nice. I don't have to reach up and press it. You can still use that, of course. I can also hold it. Hold on here. Oh, sorry. I have a little bit of problem here. And you might notice that every once in a while VoiceOver is talking and I want to cut it off. Usually we would do a 2-finger tap to stop the VoiceOver voice. But on the keyboard, we can just press the control key, usually the bottom leftmost key on the keyboard. So that key by itself pauses VoiceOver's voice. So we've talked about left, right, up, down. Left, right, up and down at the same time. A couple other really useful options is the magic tab. The magic tap's that 2-finger double tap, and we would use that if we're connected, for example, to our phone, and a phone call comes in, and we want to answer it using the keyboard. That's Control, Option, and the hyphen, or most of the time we think of this as the minus key on the keyboard because right next to the plus, it's a dash. And that keyboard combination is our start and stop. So if there's music playing, Control, Option, hyphen, uh, Control, Option, hyphen is going to start or stop that music, answer our phone call. Very useful. When we had that the keyboard section open, the commands list, we did Control Option A.
Outlook. 3 new items. Clock. 2:43 p.m. Home. Photos. Camera. Reminders. Note.
I'm hitting Control just to pause it here, but that'll read everything on the screen, starting at wherever the VoiceOver cursor currently is. Another thing that can be helpful is if we are inside of an app or somewhere else on the device.
Suggestions.
There is an area at the top of the screen called the status bar. The status bar has the time, the date, the signal strength, if we have a cellular connection, a Wi-Fi, or battery level, some really interesting stuff in there. That area across the top on the Mac computer is called the menu bar, and we use a similar keyboard command to get there. We do Control Alt M.
2:44 p.m. Status bar item.
So that'll stick us in the status bar.
Front cellular. 3 of 4 bars. Campo. 3 of 3 Wi-Fi bars. Do not disturb. Image. 84% battery power.
And as I move through, I'll get those status bar items, the battery life, the signal strength, the time, and the date. You just use that exact same keyboard command to get back out of it. So it's Control Alt M.
Settings.
And that'll drop you out of that status bar back into the top of whatever app you're in when you pressed it. There's one more very, very useful VoiceOver keyboard command, and that's the find command. And I really love it because it's much easier to use with a keyboard than the find function is on the iPhone or the iPad. What I do is I could do Control Option F to begin a find, and it's going to look for buttons and interactable things on the screen that match whatever I write. So for instance, I am here in Settings, and I want to find my way back to that Bluetooth real quickly. So I'm going to do Control Option F to start a find. I'm going to type in blue and press enter. It's going to move me to wherever it sees blue on the screen. So let me show you.
Enter search text. B-U-E. Bluetooth. On. Button.
So I just did VO, as they sometimes refer to it, or Control Option F. I typed in the word blue and I press enter, and it put me right on the Bluetooth button. I love this keyboard command when we have a physical keyboard with an iOS device. If we know what we want to get to, we know it's somewhere on the screen, we can jump straight to it. It's so nice. So we've talked about a variety of useful things on the keyboard. There's one more useful thing to know. We talked about that quick nav, left and right arrow keys at the same time. Turn that on or turn that off, and we'll hear a tone. When we have quick nav on, there's another very useful combination of arrow keys we can press, and that is up and to the right and up and to the left. That moves you through the rotor, which is usually a 2-finger kind of twist that we do. A pretty difficult gesture. It's a much easier keyboard combination. So I want to press up and to the right, and you're going to hear those rotor commands be read to you. Listen to this.
Characters. Words. Speaking rate. Hints. Containers. Headings.
So each time I press that, it moves me through a different option in the rotor. It just said headings. And then when the rotor is sent, once it says headings, it's now in headings mode. That's what the up and down arrow keys do by themselves. So if I press the down, it's going to try to find the next heading. Let me show you.
Keyboard shortcuts. Keyboard shortcuts. Heading not found.
I realize there's not a lot of exciting headings on this particular page here, but headings are usually bigger, bolder text that represent different sections. So if I was on a Wikipedia or an encyclopedia page on a topic, like dogs, for example, would take me to down would go to breeds, and down again would go to the history, and down arrow again would go to different coats, for example, and then I press the right arrow to read what's there. Headings is a very, very useful rotor command, and I can get to it just by pressing up and to the right till I hear heading, and then press down and start reading through the headings. You might find other apps use headings as well. It's a great way to navigate and so easy to do with the keyboard. I absolutely love it. So that's sort of an overview of how to explore the. That was silly of me. There's one more very important thing. I can't believe I almost forgot to tell you, and that is when we want to start typing. Whenever we're anywhere on the iPad where we can type, we're going to be entering into text fields. And with VoiceOver on, we usually use the arrow keys to navigate through our text, like go back and forth, letter by letter, line by line. And that can conflict if we've got Quick Nav on. So whenever we get into a situation where we can type, it's going to automatically turn off Quick Nav mode. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to go to the home. I'll use the keyboard shortcut for that, Control Alt H. And now I'm going to, since Quick Nav's on, I'm going to press the right arrow key until I get to Notes.
Friday, new event, WD, FaceTime, Outlook, clock, home, photo, camera, remind, notes.
There's Notes. I'm going to press the up and down arrow keys to select that.
Selected. Notes. Cindy.
I'm going to come back to the keyboard commands here in just a moment here, but I've got a note open, and I want to start writing. And when I get into a text field that I can write into, the VoiceOver is going to turn off the Quick Nav automatically. So you might hear, it's pretty quick, a bloop, like that little downtone. That means Quick Nav is turning off. And now if I type,
Tab H E L O space O R space Y O U space T O D A Y question mark today.
As I type, it's going to type everything that I write in here. Excuse me one second here.
Notification. Top and center. Note.
Just going to dismiss that note here. As I type, it's going to write in everything I type. But Quick Nav is off, so if I try to use my left and right arrow keys, it's going to move backwards through what I've written.
End of text. Question mark Y A D O T.
And read me back what I wrote. So Quick Nav turns off when you start typing automatically. So if I want to go back to navigating, I just need to turn it back on again. Hopefully you heard that bloop sound here. And now if I use the left and right, I'm back to navigating.
February 19, done. New note, note actions, button.
So that's just important to know is when we're typing, we press the Quick Nav turns off automatically, and we might need to turn it back on again. Really, you were not supposed to have Quick Nav on when we're typing. And so it usually handles turning it off automatically, and we have to manually turn it back on again if we want to go back to the arrow keys. We could always do the Control Option keyboard commands, which could be used the arrow keys or the letters, regardless of what's going on. But Quick Nav is special. When we're typing, it's turned off automatically. And if it's on and we're trying to type, it won't. So we might have to turn it off if we want to resume typing. So just keep that in mind and play with it, and I think you'll figure it out pretty quickly. One last thing about the keyboard before I'm going to jump in and talk about a cool app for learning typing. And that is every single keyboard command we've talked about are VoiceOver command keys, which means they only work with VoiceOver. They're designed to control VoiceOver's navigation and get rid of our need to do gestures. But a variety of apps also have their own keyboard commands that are special. And on Apple, all major keyboard commands Non-voiceover keyboard commands usually start with the command key, which is that key directly next to the space bar. For instance, Command N starts me a new note. So if I do that Command N,
Note. Text field is editing.
it opens up a new blank note for me to write in. Well, how do I know that? How do I ever know that Command N is there? I might notice that in Mail it's Command N, but how do I learn it in the first place? Well, I don't have a web page with a big list, but there is a keyboard hints mode built in. And the way that this works is if I press and hold the Command key by itself, nothing else.
Notes. Keyboard hints.
It opens up a dialog called Keyboard Hints. It has a list of the different types of keyboard commands that this app's going to understand. And I can navigate it with if I flick to the right or with my keyboard right arrow with quick nav on.
Bold. Command. B. Italics. Command. I. Underline. Command. U. Title. Shift Command. T.
And it's going to tell me each of the keyboard commands that I could potentially do in this application. This is context sensitive too. So you might notice if you hold on Command and you're in an email, it's going to, in the Mail app, it's going to tell you how to reply and forward. But if you hold on the Command key while you're writing an email, you're going to see commands like, what do I press to send it? By the way, if you are curious, because Mail is a common one, Command N starts a new email. Command R replies to an email. Command Shift F forwards, because Command F is taken by a different command. And to send it, it's Command Shift D. I know that's a weird one here, but they didn't want to do Command S because that's usually save. They can't do Command D because that's typically duplicate. So they had to make it Command Shift D, the last letter with the shift. You get used to it though. They've been using that key command for a long time. When I'm done with this, I can just press the escape key. That'll close the keyboard hints and let me go back to writing my note. So that's a wide overview of keyboards. Some of the most important keyboard commands that you might use, how to discover them, and how to use them. So if you like this, like I said, it'll cost me $30 for this keyboard here. Bluetooth keyboards are not that expensive, and you can get them in all different shapes and sizes. But that's all good. That's all good, but what do we do if we don't know our keyboard that well? Well, what we're going to need then is probably going to need to start using some typing software. So let me flip over my keyboard here so you can, people using the visuals can see my handsome face again here. So we want to learn how to keyboard. There's not a lot of great options for learning keyboard that is accessible with a screen reader. There are a couple options out there, but we can't use the staples we might have used in school in the past. Like for example, Mavis Beacon teaches typing, or which was the one that I originally learned on. So the options that we have out there, there are a variety of them, but they tend not to work well with screen readers. But one of them does work on the iPad pretty good, called Talking Typer. Talking Typer is a $5 app available in the App Store. So quite a steal compared to some of the prices of typing software on the Windows and an Apple platform. It's made by American Printing House for the blind. There's some people who make Talking Typer for the Windows as well, although that one's a bit more expensive. I think it's somewhere between maybe 70 and 80. I should have looked that up, but it's quite a bit more expensive, but it also has a variety of different features we don't get. If you are on an Apple computer and you don't have an iPad with a keyboard, and you're wondering, is there a typing software program that you can use there? There is a open source typing program that we might talk about typing on other systems called keystroke. That's both available for Windows and Mac. It is a little bit trickier to use. If people are interested, send me send me an email, call in that number and say, hey, I'd love to see a demo of keystroke on the Mac, and we'll consider putting that into the show here. But today we're going to talk about just Talking Typer. So $5 in the App Store. It's designed to read as you type, and is designed to work with VoiceOver. But I have noticed a couple little problems with it. I'm going to show you those problems and how you can overcome them pretty easily. So let's start out by opening up Talking Typer. So I'm going to open that up using my Siri command. Open Talking Typer. And I'll switch back over to our iPad camera here. So when this app opens up, it is got these big menus on it that say, right now it says Jonathan. That's an optional piece. Normally opens up and says guest. You can put your name in for tracking. It has a lessons and drills, a keyboard explorer, a games, although there's only one game in there, an admin, which is where we might find our settings, and a help menu. If we're using VoiceOver, we're just going to flick to the right, to the left. We can use our quick navigation to move through this. And let me just show you what the lessons and drills looks like, for example. I'm going to press the right arrow until I get to lessons and drill. I'm going to press the up and down arrow to select it with quick nav.
Log out. Current user, Jonathan. Lessons and drills. Button. Jonathan.
I've opened it up and I've got three options here: practice, default lessons, and custom lessons. I'm going to do a practice. So I'm going to press the right arrow key.
Practice drills. Beginner. Heading.
And let's navigate through and find the section on phrases. Now I'm actually going to use the rotor to headings, and I'm going to drop down because phrases is in the advanced section here.
Characters. Headings. The caps lock key. Advanced. Heading. New keys are quotation mark and apostrophe. Number key. New keys are slash, the brackets and phrases.
All right, I found a section for phrases. Now the initial starts up teaching you about the letters, the F and the J, the D and the K, and learning each letter individually. It's going to guide you through where those keys are and how to press them. I'm going to jump to phrases, and the more advanced you can hear what some of the typing is like. And we're going to notice one of the problems that we run in with VoiceOver, and which we're going to talk about how to fix. So I'm going to activate phrases with my up and down arrow keys.
Type these simple phrases to sharpen your typing skills. Text field.
All right, it opens up and it gives me some instructions here. You might think, well, I've got to start this somehow. So there's probably a start button, which there is. So if you press the right arrow,
Text field.
it just gives you a bloomp text field here. You've got to go to the left to get to the start. That's not the issue I'm talking about. It is a little bit funny, though. We're going to flick to the left or press the left arrow until we hear start, and then up and down or double tap to select it.
Start. Button. Start. Type the following phrase. Button. Followed by a space. Square meal.
So it wants me to type the phrase square meal. So I'm going to begin typing that, SQUARE. And you might notice it's not saying any of the letters that I'm typing here. It's only going to notify me when I do a incorrect letter. So for example, if I'm going to press the J right now.
M-E-A-L space.
So it makes a wrong letter sound and begins to type out the letters or say the words that are coming up next. But you noticed, if you could hear that well, is that I couldn't hear, it said M-E-A-L. It got really quiet on the first couple letters. And that's because VoiceOver has a feature called ducking. And that means when the app is trying to read something and VoiceOver is trying to play something, VoiceOver is going to be louder than everything else. It's going to lower the volume of whatever sound the app's making. And that boop sound interrupted VoiceOver, and we end up with a bunch of the letters very, very difficult to hear. And if we leaned in close to try to hear them, it then gets loud again. So we've got a problem. Well, there's an easy solution to this. So I'm going to stop this demo here. I'm going to press the up and down arrow keys to
Stop alert.
stop it.
0 words per minute time. 1 minute and 13 seconds accuracy. 87% 1 errors. Quit button. Selected. Phrases.
All right. So give me a notification telling me how I did. I didn't go very far. So I've got a problem here, right? Not loud enough for the correction. So what I have to do is I have to turn off, when we're using this keyboard program, it's a good idea to turn off voiceover ducking. And we can do that in the voiceover settings. I'm going to activate Siri and ask to open up voiceover settings. Open voiceover settings.
Let's take a look at the settings for VoiceOver.
Settings. Accessibility. Back button.
All right, it's taking me into the accessibility section, put me in voiceover here, and I'm just going to navigate to the audio section, pressing the right arrow key on my keyboard because quick nav is on, or flick to the right.
Setting. Search. Search. Accessibility. Voiceover. Tap once. Double. Learn. Speak. Braille. Verbal. Audio. Button.
So I'm going to select the audio button.
Sound. Voiceover. Back button. Audio. Sounds. Audio ducking. On.
Audio ducking. I'm just going to turn that off.
Off.
Now that means that VoiceOver won't make itself louder and it won't decrease the volume of everything else in order to be heard. Now, in some cases that might be less than ideal. For instance, listening to music, you want ducking on because what if the music's lyrics can't be, you can't hear VoiceOver's voice over it. So I'm going to turn this off while I'm using it. It's a good idea to know that you can always go back and turn it back on again. So I'm going to use the app switcher to get back quickly to our to the talking typer here. So that's Control Alt H twice.
App switcher. Settings. Talking typer. Active. New keys are talking typer. Learning mode.
All right, I'm back in talking typer. I'm going to
Practice. Beginner. Heading. The caps lock. Advanced. New keys are quotation mark and the bracket. Selected. Phrases.
I'm going to navigate back to phrases and select it, and let's try this again.
Type these simple phrases to sharpen your typing skills. Start. Start. Type the following phrase button followed by a space. Square meal.
All right, it's asking me to type square meal again. I'm going to do that SQUARE space, and let's do that typo again and see and listen to what happens.
MEAL space.
Now I can hear it. It's telling me I need to type MEAL and then space.
With regard to. Pardon me. Knuckle down. Hot potato. ATO. Good evening.
Much better. I can actually start to practice this. So there's a couple other settings that are worth knowing about. I'm going to stop this with the up and down arrow key.
Quit. Selected.
It's a lot more useful now, but I'm not getting a ton of feedback. If I was a brand new user and I was hitting the wrong keys, it's just going I'm not hearing when I press the right keys. I'm not getting a lot of feedback. So I know a lot of people who like to have a lot more feedback. So let's go into the settings and let's give ourselves more feedback to work with here. So I can left arrow till I get to the back button here.
New the caps lock key, capitals and the period. New keys are home keys for the right hand, home keys for the left hand. Begin practice. Learning modes. Learning. Talking typer. Talking typer. Back button.
I've got another problem that I've run into before. Sometimes when I come back from a lesson and I get to this main page here and I try to use my left and right arrow keys.
Talking typer.
I get stuck. That is, I try to go back and forth, and now I seem like I'm stuck. I'm back on the main menu. So visually, you might, if you can see the visuals, I can see I'm in the Lessons, Drills, Explorer, but it's not telling me that. I'm just getting talking typer, back button. That back button is causing a problem. Now, if I sat here long enough, that back button kind of goes away.
Talking typer. Login. Button.
And now it's working again. If I was just being a little patient, but that sounds like it'd be pretty frustrating. If you get stuck in talking typer, the best thing to do is to hit the home button and just reopen the app. That'll fix VoiceOver's focus and put you back in the right place here. So it's a little bug. It's a little annoying, but we hit home and come back and it's good to go. Or if we wait a moment, like it did this time, it usually clears itself up. So, um, but listen, it's a $5 app and it does a really good job. So we have to deal with some of these little funny things. So I mentioned a couple of settings that I might want to change. I'm going to press the right arrow to get to the admin section. The admin section is actually where we change the settings.
Talking typer, logout, current user, lessons and drills, keyboard explorer, games, administrator, button,
All right, so I'm going to select the administration button.
keyboard explorer, users, button,
I have a couple options: users, groups, and app preferences. These are some teacher tools you can do for creating a user to track, and then you can go in and open up that user and see their progress. For an individuals like most of the people listening to this this episode here, you can just go straight to app preferences.
groups, add preferences, button, admin password, button,
So the things I like to do here is we can choose echo correct keys.
echo correct keys, echo correct keys, echo correct keys,
Oh, so now I'm having a,
echo correct keys, switch button, off,
I had to navigate to the switch button here. Normally we don't have to do that in an app, but that's okay. It wasn't turning it on here, but now I'm going to use that up and down arrow keys.
on,
So now echo correct keys is on. Let's see what else is here.
ding after correctly typing each drill, ding after correctly typing each drill, switch button, on,
Right, that's something we normally would do. And then another feature is there's a startup tune that usually plays when we open it. I didn't care for that, so I actually already turned that off.
play startup tune, play startup tune, switch button, off, speech settings, button,
There's a speech settings button which lets us control the speed of the voice as it reads to us, like when it's telling us what keys we need to press and repeat back. If we need to slow that down, we can do that in speech settings. And the last option is lesson text size,
lesson text size, button,
where we can increase the size of the fonts. Now, to be honest, the size doesn't get that big. It's a larger print, but it's not a very large print. So this is really best suited for voiceover, or a teacher who's teaching someone who's low vision is maybe doing some controls for it. You might have to use some magnification. The large text size is not that large.
double tap, adjust lesson texts, done, text size adjuster, 50%, adjustable,
So you can see the size of the font here. I'm just going to press the up arrow key.
70%, 80%, 90%, 100%.
And this is the largest that it gets, which is, I would say, maybe a 20 size font on a printout. It's not really, really big. And so I know a lot of my low vision clients, this is not big enough. They might still use the magnifier, or if they can, or if they're comfortable enough, this voiceover tends to add quite a bit of support to it. If you don't have voiceover turned on, it still reads when you type. And it still reads back all of the typing instructions. What it doesn't read is those buttons like the start button and the stop button, which stay pretty small, although they are always in the same spot. So you can use it low vision with magnification, but no, you're still going to be relying on the speaking quite a bit. You don't need voiceover on to get the spoken feedback. You just need it for reading the menus. So that is the Talking Typer program. It is, like I mentioned, $5. It's got a couple little bugs in it, but it does a really, really good job. It's very affordable, and with a little bit of patience, with some of those little bugs there, I think you'll find it works really good. And the Branding Printing House has been updating it from time to time as well. So I have had a client who had some bad experiences with it in the past. But I would encourage people like that to get back into it. They've had some really good updates lately fix some of the issues with VoiceOver. And right now they're offering, as far as I know, the only low vision and blindness typing instructional app on the iPad, and a pretty good one at that. So that is the Talking Typer app. So between the Talking Typer app and what we've learned on the keyboard, hopefully you've got enough information to be on your way to being a keyboard master on your iPad or your iPhone. So I want everybody who's excited about this, who are writers, to think about getting those keyboards and start using their devices to write that next great novel, for example. All right. So we're at about 3:12 right now. I originally intended this to be a shorter episode, but it turned out when I started digging in, it's a pretty big topic. So if you do have questions here, like I mentioned, this is a new tool. It's a bit different. And what you're going to need to do is to raise your hand. And the way you're going to do that is if you are viewing this on a computer. If you're on a Windows computer, you would press Alt Y. If you're on an Apple computer, you would do Option Y. If you're on an iPhone, you're going to find the raise hand under the More menu. So if you're with VoiceOver, flick to the right until you hear More, double tap, and then flick to the right to hear Raise Hand. If you're using the visual, you tap More, and there's a raise hand. And then finally, if you are calling us up on a phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand as well. So I see we do have a hand raised here, and I'm going to, this is the first time ever. I meant to try to do a test with this, so everybody be patient here. I'm going to allow our first person to talk here. So Al, I think I've got you set up.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, it works. A couple of things.
Yes.
First of all, with the microphone setup you had, really could not hear what your phone was speaking when you were making all those gestures. So, yeah, you understand what I'm saying? When you navigated on your phone or with your keyboard and your iPhone or iPad was speaking, could not really hear it.
Okay.
That's number one. Number two is also, I didn't catch the name of the keyboard. It was Logitech, but didn't get the model number nor the model number for the Apple keyboard.
So the model number for the keyboard, that the Logitech one I was using is the K380, K380. Now they make a handful of these K modeled keyboards. I think there's a 280 as well that's sometimes a little bit cheaper. It looks exactly the same. The K380 is what I was using. One of the things that I really like about the 380, and it's not that much different than I think the 280, is it's got it can be used on. It's got 3 buttons on it: F1, F2, and F3. That can be used to switch between devices. So if I hold down the 1, it connects to my iPad. If I press the 2, it connects to my phone. And then if I really, really wanted to, I could press 3. And if my computer has it, I can connect to that as well. They do make the 280, which only connects to one device, which would meet most people's needs as well. But I think it's exactly the same price. So the only difference is it comes in blue and this one is gray. Not a big difference here.
Okay, so that's Kilo 380. And then what about the Apple device?
So the Apple keyboard I was holding as an example, this particular one they actually don't make anymore. Apple only makes one Bluetooth keyboard now. So and so if you go to the Apple or any of those places, there's just one. It's just the Apple wireless keyboard. It doesn't have a model number.
Okay, and then these and it has to be Bluetooth. And you did mention something about some that have a cable, but that would be for some other brands.
Yeah. So I mentioned that if if you have a wired keyboard, which a lot of the keyboards coming out today are Bluetooth or
Okay.
wireless, but if you go to the store and you find like there's a big mechanical keyboard, it's got good deep keys,
Sure.
it's got the number pad, it's ergonomic, and they don't make a Bluetooth version of it. They only make one that plugs into the computer. That's when if you're like, I have to have this keyboard, you can get that $30. It's literally called
Cable.
Lightning to USB camera adapter.
Okay. All right.
And so I happen to have a client who fits right into that category. She has a ergonomic. It's got kind of a bowl. It's got kind of a bowl shape to it. They don't make this keyboard anymore.
Curved. Yep.
And they do make curved ones, but they don't make this one. Like, this is her favorite keyboard in the world. And I go, if you really, really need to use it, you can get an adapter.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, you're
now,
very welcome.
Do I unraise my hand now?
I lower your hand for you, so that's okay.
Thank you. Then should I mute myself?
Yeah. Well, you know what? I don't have any other hands up yet. You had another question that you called into the question line with. I think maybe it was a topic suggestion here. And you. Well, no, that is a big topic. I wrote it down here. It's about viewing graphs, images.
Yes, there was something
charts.
There was something that came in through NFB or something. Wanted a survey about how people are using graphs and so on, and I didn't know anything about that, and whether there was even something available. So that's why the question.
Yeah, so I think I'm gonna have to look into that a little bit more myself. I know a lot of the tools for trying to get information from images, for example, but that doesn't apply well to graphs. Where we might have like a graph that displays out the average temperature every year, so you can figure out like how when it got cold, is that really bad for Minnesota? What's the temperature? And you might have a graph, and that information is very hard to navigate. Unless you can get access to the raw data, which would be like a table, and tables are not too hard to navigate. Depends on your screen reading comfortable. They can be quite challenging still. I'm gonna have to look into that as well. I know none of these image recognizers. So, for instance, Seeing AI as an app can look at a picture, analyze it, and give you a description. It doesn't do anything good for graphs. It's only good for like, it's a dog. And then if you do like an OCR version of it, then you just get a list of numbers that are the X and Y. None of that's readable. So I have to look into that, because that's something that that definitely can be a major accessibility concern, especially as data is very, very helpful and useful.
If somebody's taking a science class or even statistics class or anything like that, boy, it'd be really a pain.
Sure. I know that here at the state of Minnesota, for students who are dealing with visual things, like, for instance, a picture of like a cell, which each of the particular sections of the cell are labeled, they will make, if you go through the Braille department, they'll actually make a tactile, which is they make a well, it's not three-dimensional necessarily, but they go and they make an impression on, it's actually kind of a plastic thing, and so you can kind of feel it and touch it, but that doesn't really play well to a mathematical graph showing an X and Y axis. It works in concept, but I'd be interested to see, we need that for something to be really, really accessible, right? We need that instant access, not this like, there's an interesting graph, I'm going to go send it to the state, and as long as it's not too busy, hopefully it will only take them a couple weeks to put together. Well, that's not equal access, is it? Right? that's access with like a big asterisk next to it. That's not what I would call accessibility.
By the way, I'm using my new HP for this Zoom webinar. It's the first time I've used it, so it worked out okay.
Well, I'm so glad to hear it. It sounds like it's working better than my technology is today as well. So
that's fine. I just got to find some cables here for the C size USB. Well, I think
we're going to close this down here in a second. I got one more question for you out. This is just for me, everybody. This is not, but you said, could you hear any of the iPad whatsoever? Was it just really quiet, or was it like non-existent?
Real quiet.
Real quiet. Okay. Yeah, my original plan was to do a screen share, which I think would pull it into Zoom. And I'll figure that out next time. But I
Sure.
appreciate that. I might have to re-record some of this then, because I would like to
Yeah.
put an archive up. But
Absolutely.
so, all right. Well, thanks again. Thanks again so much, Al, for having a question and
You
jumping
bet.
in here.
Thank you.
Hey,
Always
have a nice
appreciate
weekend.
it.
Hey, you're
Yep,
very
bye-bye.
welcome. So that does segment myself into just a recap here. If you do go to blind.support/episodes, or go to blind.support, and it's like the fourth or fifth link on the page here, you can link back to our archived episodes, where I'm going to be trying to post as many of those as possible. Episode 2 is missing. That got lost in the technology ether, unfortunately. Number 7 is also missing, but I've got to actually found a way, and I'm going to fix that and get that up there as well. And so that's blind.support/episodes. So thanks again for joining us. Thanks again for learning keyboards. And if you have additional questions or subjects you'd like us to talk about in the future, I'm just going to say that question line one more time. That's 320-428-0122. And also, when you get one of these invites to one of these episodes, they are not exclusive. Feel free, if you have friends or family or other professionals you think might be interested in the topic, go ahead and forward that along. Anybody can join us. So also, if you jumped into this and were thinking, I can't figure out how to answer a question in this new format, I don't like it at all, you can also send us into the question line. You can also give us feedback there as well. So thanks again. I will try to get the next episode out in 2 weeks again, and not give that long hiatus again. We'll be picking out some new topics and going in deep. Thanks again for joining us. Stay safe, stay well, stay warm, and thanks again for joining us.